So hello, I'm here at the Big Plant Pod with Elle James, who's an apprentice at the Botanic Gardens. So I'm a trustee with Span Art, and the purpose of Saturday is an event to honour the Big Plant Sale, to create an enjoyable online day instead, bringing some light relief and a sense of togetherness during this strange period, while also supporting gardening businesses and organisations out there. So hello, Elle.
Hi there.
So you're a first-year apprentice at the National Botanic Garden of Wales. And so the National Botanic Garden of Wales and Span Arts have come together today to celebrate gardening. Obviously, everybody is stuck at home. Luckily, most people get to enjoy the gardens. So we've come together also because it's the Botanic Garden's 20th birthday this year. And we want to try and, remind people that after lockdown to head there and see what's going on. There's a lot of things that people are missing at the moment, unfortunately. So we're going to go on in a minute to answer some questions that people have sent in. Okay, so the first question we've had sent in by a SPAN member is, we have a pony and I want to use the manure for the garden, but I've been told if you use it too soon, it can be bad for the plants. So how long should I wait before I can use the manure?
Yeah, that's quite a good question, actually. And I guess the main issue with using manure too soon on your plants is that it produces so much heat, so it can burn the roots of your plants if you put it on too early. So one of the best things you can do with the manure is, if you already have a compost pile, just add it to your compost piles to begin with, and that can really help speed up the process. You could also have a freestanding pile of manure. So if you wanted to do a separate area, you can also add sort of brown material from your garden to any sticks you can put in there and mix it up a bit. You've got to make sure that it is moist, but not too moist. But you just don't want it to dry out, basically. So if you're doing this and sort of you're doing the right process and all the right things, and you do need to turn it every now and again as well, so just get in there with a big fork and just turn it over. If you're doing this properly, I would say it could take up to 3 months to be ready, but it will always differ. I guess the best way to really check that it's ready to use is to make the call yourself. So look at the soil. If it's nice and crumbly, and if it looks like soil, then and it's lost its sort of manure smell, then you're ready to use it. And you can use it as a mulch. You can use it to dig through your vegetable beds. You can use it within your flower borders. And obviously there are some vegetables that don't particularly like manure, but there are some that really do like it and thrive, like courgettes, for example. So so I would just basically keep an eye on it and keep turning it, and it should be ready for you within about 3 months. But a lot of people tend to call it black gold when it's ready to be used. So I think that's pretty much what I can say on that. It's just basically just lots of turning, lots of labour work, but it's really worth it at the end. Horse manure is one of the best manures you can use in your garden.
Sounds good. Okay. Our next question. My mum's camellias are not flowering well. I have one beautiful flower, and one of the plants has beautiful flowers and one without, but the conditions are fairly similar. So could you suggest anything?
So camellias, they are really lovely plants to grow in the garden. They do really like acidic soil. So I'm not sure on what the soil is like in the garden, but I guess maybe there might be something going on with one in particular, the one that's not blooming. You could always see if it's getting too much light, for example. They don't really like direct light all day, so it'll probably like a bit of morning light. but in the afternoon it will like it quite dappled and shady. So you could, to improve the acidity in the soil, you could maybe add some ericaceous mulch or feed. Give it a feed in springtime, so around about now, but don't feed it any later than July, because that could actually lead to bud drop. So just give it a feed every now and again. Make sure that you're using the right stuff, so you can get ericaceous fertilizer. Another thing that could have been a problem with it is that they don't really like to be too dry. So during the summer, it might have gotten quite dry, and during I know last year we had huge dry spells, about 6 weeks of basically sun all day, every day, and no rain. So at these times, it is really important to water them and make sure they're not drying out completely, because this could actually limit bud formation. So I guess with the camellias, I'm not really sure if they're together, then it could be something specific with the soil. But yeah, so just check things like that. Make sure it's nicely watered during the summer. Give it a good feed. Make sure the soil is nice and acidic, and yeah, just keep checking on it and be patient, and just hope that it's going to bud next year.
Okay, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
And our next question, something that's probably happening quite a lot now. What are your recommendations for beginner gardeners?
So I guess with beginner gardeners, as you know, I'm a fairly beginner myself. I think one of the best things that I got told was to just experiment and just start growing seeds and start getting familiar with soil, and really getting my hands dirty. Getting familiar with all sorts of different plants, learning some of the sort of jargon that comes with gardening, learning the words that basically we use quite commonly in the garden. And yeah, I think just experimenting and just getting to know which direction the light is coming in and what plants enjoy what situation. So obviously there's plants that like shade, there's plants that like direct sunlight, and yeah, some that like drier soil, or some that like, you know, bog garden plants, things like that. You know, it's just familiarizing yourself with everything. But yeah, I think the best thing I did was just literally get my hands dirty and get out there, and really just get a lot of joy from planting plants and seeing them thrive and just tending to them. And you really get, like, form a connection then with the plants and with gardening, and it just becomes almost like an obsession in a way. But yeah, that would be my top tip, is just basically get out there and do it. Like,
yeah,
you can read all sorts of books and things like that, which are obviously really helpful, and there's lots of people out there, lots of gardeners out there that are giving some really good tips. But yeah, definitely just get out there and do it and start, and then you'll realize that it becomes addictive.
And if I could add a tip there as well, I'd say to keep checking on things. For instance, obviously it's nice to be home more now to keep an eye on things daily, but I put some runner beans in recently, some seedlings, and I went up that evening and some bug had started to already eat them. So I was able to find that bug and move him on elsewhere. Whereas if I'd gone the next day, it would all have been gone. So try and plant things where you can see them from your kitchen window, maybe, where you can keep an eye on them for cats going in there, and because it's disheartening if something's ruined the next day.
Yeah, it is really disheartening. Yeah, I had the same thing with things in my cold frames. You know, every night something, probably a slug, is coming out and eating all of my perishables, all my veg. So yeah, just going out even with a torch at night, you know, it's like a 24-hour job, really, isn't it?
Okay, thank you. And our next question is, What are your 5 top tips for growing vegetables in a small balcony or a small backyard?
That's a good one. I think balcony gardening is getting much more popular now because obviously with lots of people on lockdown, they're having to make do with the space that they've got already, and a lot of people obviously have very small spaces. So this is quite a good question. I would say one of the top tips I would give is to get the deepest pots you can to grow veg in. You can grow all sorts of things in pots. You can grow carrots, you can grow lettuce, you can even grow courgettes, cucumbers, all sorts of things. So I'd get nice deep pots. You don't want to go too shallow because otherwise the roots won't be able to spread and they won't enjoy themselves, and you get a very unhappy plant. So they'll like lots of space. The second tip, I guess, would be to get creative. You can get all sorts of different things. You can get pots to hang on your balcony railings, for example, and you can grow lettuce in these pots. So if your balcony is situated outside a kitchen window or somewhere that's easy access, it's quite nice to go out and just pick lettuce yourself and put it in the salad that night. I think people get a lot of joy from doing something like that. Some people reuse things, I think, so things like wellies, you can fill them up with soil and you can put plants in there as well. So there's lots of things that you can get creative with. I would say another suggestion would be to just keep an eye on everything. You can get lots of pests in pots, especially things like vine weevil. So just check your pots regularly, check that they're not being infested by anything. Vine weevil is quite annoying. It's a little beetle, but their larvae love young roots, so they'll just nibble away and eventually your plant will just wither and die. So just make sure you keep an eye on things like that. Things like aphids aren't too bad because usually outside you'll get some natural predators coming in. Things like ladybirds love aphids as well. I'd check regularly for things like that. And the final tip, I would say, just don't let your compost dry out. It's quite easy because you're not using the soil in the garden. You're having to water yourself quite a bit, and the compost dries out much quicker in pots. So just make sure it's moist at all times, and just make sure you regularly check it. I'd say that's it really. Just keep on growing. You can have lots of companion planting with veg as well. Things like nasturtiums are beautiful and they trail, so they'd be really nice over a balcony as well.
Okay. And then a similar kind of line here. Have you got any top tips for encouraging a love of gardening in children?
That's another great question actually, because obviously it's really great to get the next generation out and about as well, especially with all sorts of technology out now, so iPads, PlayStations, things like that. So there's definitely more of a call to get young people out in the gardens and getting sort of connected to nature again. I would say one of the best things to do is to get them involved, give them projects, almost give them the main role of the garden, get them sort of picking their own flowers to put into the soil, creating a flower bed, designing their own flower bed, all sorts of different things like that. Getting them to discover insects, even if you're not so keen on insects yourself, it's you want them to be interested in sort of the pollinators and why they're so important. So building things like bug hotels or bee hotels and things like that, I think would be awesome for children to do, and they get to see them being used.
Yeah.
And also building things like hedgehog houses, and something that they can connect to, basically. And also sowing seeds is something that's really good children's activity to do. Things like nasturtiums, because they're quite big seeds for nasturtiums, so they you can easily see them and put them in the soil. Sweet peas, sunflowers, marigolds, things like that. They're really nice, and they're so vibrant and bright and colourful as well. And this I think would work really, really well with children. So yeah, just growing things that are quite fast growing. They can see all their efforts, and there's lots of things out there now as well where, you know, they've got kids toolkits, and you've got the mini forks and the mini spades, which I think are thoroughly cute. But yeah, there's lots of things like that. So just giving them charge of, letting them take charge of the garden, I think is a winner for getting children involved in the garden.
Yeah. Okay. And then on the subject of seeds, another question comes in here. I've been given a pack of wildflower seeds. Can I just throw them on the lawn, or should I prepare in some way?
Okay, so yeah, I guess this is another really popular thing that people seem to be doing at the moment, is creating their own little wildflower gardens, which is really lovely and really good for pollinators. The main thing with wildflowers generally is that they can't really compete with the grass growing in your lawn. So yeah, you will need to prepare in some way. It can be quite backbreaking work, so you need to pick a fairly open and sunny area, because they really thrive in the sun. But the main thing you need to do to the soil is reduce the fertility, because they really don't like fertile soil. So I would suggest just digging out your patch and removing the turf and removing the first 3 inches of topsoil first. Getting rid of any perennial weeds, so things like dandelions, buttercups, things like that, just making sure they're all gone so they don't pop back up again. They can be quite hard to sort of keep control of. And then basically just keep raking the soil until you have a really sort of fine, crumbly soil. And then I would sow your seeds. But one of the main things I would do, though, is protect your seeds from birds, because they love wildflower seeds, so they'll definitely come in and annihilate all the seeds that you put down. So I would suggest putting things, either putting a netting over just to protect it for that first period of time when they're germinated from the birds, or you know, I know some places will put up CDs on string just to deter the birds away from the area. But obviously that is quite backbreaking work, and it is quite hard to do, sort of to dig especially if it's a big patch. So one of the things I think is really good, and what a lot of people are doing now, is they're just letting their grass grow long that they've already got. Because you actually never know what previous history that area has. So you could have your own wildflowers in your garden and you just don't know about it. So I would suggest just laying off the mowing on a certain patch of your lawn and just let your grass grow. You can do things like mow a little path through the middle, and so you can have a look to see what's happening. But you know, there's a lot of people that have done this, and they've had early spotted orchids come up, they've had cowslip come up, all sorts of things, lady smock, and all of these native plants are obviously really, really beneficial for our pollinators. So yeah, if you don't want to do any digging and removing the soil and then being upset when the birds have taken all your seeds away, then yeah, I'd definitely suggest just letting it grow and just seeing what happens.
If you mow that strip down the middle, at least you're saying, no, I do mow, I'm just purposely letting it grow.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and then moving on to our last question that we've had sent in. This one intrigues me as well. It's always something that's made me wonder. Why are there different feeds for different plants, such as tomato feeds and fish blood and bone?
Yeah, so basically most fertilizers are based on 3 plant nutrients. So you've got nitrogen, which is really, really good for green leafy growth. You've got phosphorus, which is really good for healthy roots and keeping your plant nice and healthy down there. And then you've got potassium as well, which is really good for flowering and fruiting. So obviously tomato feeds are very high in potassium because they will increase the flowering and fruiting, and that's what you want in a tomato plant. So you don't want a very leafy tomato plant, so there's fairly little nitrogen in there. So that's basically what tomato feed is made up of. You can also use things like alternatives if you don't want to go off and buy tomato feed. If you've got a fairly big garden, you can plant comfrey, and comfrey is a really good alternative to use for that. So you basically just let it brew in water for a couple of weeks, and then that is a fertilizer you can use straight away. And yeah, that's high in potassium, so you could always use that on things like tomato plants. Fish blood and bone is different. It's an organic fertilizer, and it's a slow release fertilizer, so it will be beneficial to your plants for months on end. I know a lot of people tend to plant plants and they put a little bit of fish blood and bone at the bottom, because it has both phosphorus and nitrogen in it, so it will increase healthy roots, and it will also increase flowering, and obviously leafy growth as well. So there's all sorts of different things that you can use, and they have all sorts of different nutrients in them. So you've just got to keep an eye on what your plants need and what they prefer. Another good, really high source in nitrogen is nettles, and obviously nettles are growing everywhere, and you can get them they're so easily accessible. You could literally just get yourself a bucket, put a load of nettles in there, let it brew in some water for a couple of weeks, same as the comfrey, and you can use that straight away on your plants. So yeah, a really nice high source of nitrogen in there. So again, that's for really green leafy growth, and it'll make your garden look lovely. But actually, one of the top fertilizers you can use, which is super high in nutrients, is your own wee. So it might not be comfortable for everyone, but one of the best fertilizers you can use in your garden is your own wee. You would have to dilute this, but not too much, and you can use that straight away on your plants. You can put it on your compost pile, and that will really, really help your compost pile. So that's one of the best ones.
Thank you. So thank you, Elle, for joining us, and thank you to the National Botanic Garden of Wales. It's been really interesting, and I'm sure everybody is really ready to get out into their gardens now.
Yeah, you're welcome. We're obviously missing the public quite a lot in the garden, and we're all really working hard as a team to keep things going and keep things looking lovely for hopefully welcoming everyone back in the not too distant future.
Yeah, and if everybody check out Facebook today for the big plant pods, and we hope to see you obviously again next year at the plant sale, and we miss you, and keep well everybody. Thank you.